connected virtually so we can still do our work and responsibilities as we used to be. First thing first, I want to announce that all audience need to fill out presents and evaluating form at the chat room in order to get the seminar certificate. And I am delighted to welcome and give the most warm greetings to Honorable Director of Brawijaya University Postgraduate Program, Honorable the First and the Second Vice Director of Brawijaya University Postgraduate Program, Honorable All Lecturer of Brawijaya University Postgraduate Program, Honorable Keynote Speakers, Professor Dan Goodley from University of Sheffield, Mrs. Vivi Yulaswati as Senior Advisor to Minister of National Development Planning on Social and Poverty Reduction, and Mr. Slamet Thohari from Department Sociology of Brawijaya University, Honorable Moderator of webinar, Dr. Wike M.Si, whom also known as Head of Master Program of Women Gender Studies, and honorable to all beloved guests and audience. Before I turn over the webinar to Dr. Wike M.Si as the moderator, I would like to ask Fadilah Putra as the Vice Director Brawijaya University Postgraduate Program to say few words to the audience and give brief explanations why disability studies matter. Please welcome, and time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Vanessa, and good day, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I hope everyone is healthy, safe, and still productive during these difficult times during this pandemic. Well, first of all, I want to thank to Professor Dan Goodley for joining us in this event, and hopefully this is going to the beginning for our further cooperation between us, or even maybe between the two institutions, Brawijaya and Sheffield University, and also Bu Vivi from Bappenas, Indonesian National Planning Body. And of course, to all of the speakers, Amek and Wike, of course, the moderators, and the audience. In this presentation, I just want to highlight 2 points, Professor Dan, Bu Vivi, and everyone. One is the obstacles that we're having in initiating this study program. And the second point that I want to address in this opportunity is about the chance or the opportunity of forming disability program in Brawijaya University, especially. Pasasarjana is one of the specific institution in Brawijaya University that focusing on the multidiscipline and interdiscipline studies program. Currently, we have 3 studies that focusing on the master and doctoral level degree. One is environmental studies, second is security study, and the third one is the gender or women studies. As an interdisciplinary program, we believe that the real problem that we're facing cannot be handled by only one single discipline. So for example, if we try to build a road or the bridge, the expertise on civil engineering only cannot do that. It requires many expertise such as accounting, finance, law, government, or even archaeologists. Because we have experience in Indonesia when the government try to build a road, and suddenly one of the site is, there is a archaeological sites, so the government cannot continue the development of the road. That's the proof that monodiscipline cannot solve the real problem on the ground. So disability studies is one amongst many issues that requires multidiscipline and interdiscipline, or even multi-dimensions approach. In disability issues, it covers many aspects such as health service, education, employment, and access to public service in general. Therefore, disability studies also requires the integration of wide array disciplines. It even encompasses dichotomy of social and natural sciences. Many disciplines have to be involved in the studies such as disability studies. However, in the current academic traditions, especially in Indonesia, maybe it's information from Professor Dan Goodley, that interdisciplinary approach in the academia is not something that is usual, where the monodisciplines is dominant in the university, the formal academic institutions. For example, the way how university organize and structure are based on the faculties that are monodisciplines. Even in academic career, the linearity is required. For example, if someone wants to be the lecturer, he or she has to be sure that in the undergraduate level and then master level and doctoral level has linear in the single disciplines. This is the problem of the, to me, this is one of the problems to develop a rich study such as disability studies. So this is one of the main obstacles for interdisciplinary approach study program, including disability studies, because in the regime of the formal academic organization, it's still, based on the monodisciplines approach. So this is the challenge when we try to form or forming the disability studies in University of Brawijaya. That many people feel not comfortable. Many people feel like there is not something that normal. While there is a study program in master level that not clear whether it is belong to one or the other disciplines. So, for instance, in my experience, when we try to initiate this program, I was asked by one of the authority whether, for example, she asked me, what is the prospective student's background should be? Will you accept the prospective student in this program from social science or from natural science? If it's from social science, is it from law? Is it from social political or from economics? So this kind of questions is, very important to the authority in order to approve, like a study program here, because the monodisciplines approach that very dominant. And of course, they also ask further about the graduates. So for example, he or she finished the study in this program, so he or she will be belong to which associations. There is a associations based on the discipline in Indonesia, like accountants and maybe architects or maybe doctors. So if someone graduates from the disability study program, which membership of the association he or she will be belong to? So that those kind of questions that very hard for me to answer in the context of the interdisciplinary program like this disability study program that we are initiating currently. However, and also we not have the independent study program yet for this program because the procedures and the requirement is very complicated.
Hello.
In Indonesia. Is quite complicated, so we not have the independent study program for this study.
From Tegal. A question for the disability. What is there is a scholarship for me, a schizophrenia?
Okay, shall we move on? All right, so in Indonesia, there is no specific, however, we also have, those are the obstacles or the problems that we're facing when we're initiating this program. However, we also have a couple of positive opportunity why we try to establish this study program. So one is that the fact in Indonesia, there is no specific program, especially in undergraduate and graduate level, that focusing on disability studies. Many of those in a special education program, which only covers about education aspects. As we know that disability is not only about education, it's also about many aspects like health infrastructure, environment, technology, many things that, the existing study program, such as the special education program, will not, cover those dimensions comprehensively. Therefore, I agree that disability studies program in Brawijaya is based on the human rights approach and social model perspective, which cover issues more comprehensive than the special education program that already around for a while. As far as I know, the master's program of disability with these approaches is the first and only in Indonesia. So maybe Professor Dan can also give us the insight how the disability program in Sheffield is specifically developed. The second reason why we're quite optimistic about this program is that the international attention on disability studies is quite high, and not only international donors, but also multilateral organizations, the world-leading universities now concerned with this issue. So to me, that this is the opportunity for our students in this study program to access collaboration with international community. And hopefully with this initiation and this webinar, we can attract more collaboration, more people, helping us to develop this study program. So lastly, we agree that disability is an identity, is more than just circumstances that someone having. Thus, it needs not only recognition, but also awareness of and progressive action from the society, including government, to promote equal opportunity to people with disability, become fully a part of society. So there are many questions in order to achieve this aim. One probably is that what kind of actions that are actually needed to address this problem? Or what is the assessment of the current situations, especially in Indonesia, about how the government, serve people with disability? What are the obstacles and opportunities in providing public service to people with disabilities? What are matters to people with disabilities? So those are few among many questions that I hope this study program will facilitate to answers. Because I personally believe that misconstruction of problem is dangerous because it will lead to wrong solutions. Many people always ask about solution. They don't really have a patience to understand the problem comprehensively. Therefore, understanding the problem comprehensively, to me, is more important than the solution itself. So I really hope that this even become the beginning to us to understand disability issue more comprehensively, and at the end of the day, we can provide solution, the best solution to the government and the society regarding disability issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Mr. Fadilah for the speech. And now please welcome Dr. Wike M.Si to take over and lead the webinar alongside with the keynote speakers. Time is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ibu Vanessa, as co-host of this seminar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good morning, Professor Goodley. Good morning, everyone. And good afternoon for all audience in Indonesia, because now in Indonesia approaching around 3 p.m. 10 past 3. Is it right? Okay. So my name is Vicky. I'm convener of Gender Women Studies in a School of Postgraduate Brawijaya University. And for more than 2 hours, I will be serving as your moderator of this seminar. As Dr. Fadilah Putra mentioned earlier, that this seminar is discussing a lot about disability and disability studies, including about maybe the obstacle Dr. Fadilah has mentioned before. So in this sense, we invite experts to discuss why disability studies. So we have 3 speakers here. Professor Dan Goodley from University of Sheffield, and Dr. Vivi Yulaswati from Bappenas. Bappenas is a National Development Agency of Republic of Indonesia. And last, Mr. Slamet Thohari from Brawijaya University, and they will presenting their paper respectively. So throughout this seminar, we'll be assisted by Mr. Dimas Nugroho, Mrs. Nisrina, and Ms. Arum as typists and sign interpreters. So thank you for that. We have a rule. After all speakers give a presentation, I will continue to guide with a session Q&A. So for all audience, can ask question to all speakers then. Maybe you can write the question in the chat board during the presentation. And I'm not talking too much. Now I can turn to Professor Goodley first for explaining to us about what is disability studies and why we need to study it. Professor Goodley is a prominent scholar in disability studies and critical disability studies from University of Sheffield. And I believe many of you maybe have read his books as I did, or maybe watching his lecturing in YouTube probably. So Professor Goodley, time is yours. Thank you.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I do have some slides, but I'm not going to talk to those slides. I think I'm just going to talk to you and keep with the conversation here. I'm looking forward to learning from you in Indonesia and across, it looks like across Southeast Asia from the chat about your engagement with disability. So the question that has been asked today is why disability studies? Sometimes, you know, if you ask a child why, they say, why not? And why not is a quite a negative response. The why of disability studies is, I suppose, very important. And it's important because disability studies is a human question. Disability studies is a human phenomenon. And disability studies, as was being spoken about earlier in the introduction by the professor, is that we need an interdisciplinary response. So what I want to do is just very briefly talk through some kind of approaches that capture disability studies in answer to this why, and I'm particularly mindful of the COVID-19 context and why disability studies has never been needed more than now. So as I'm sure you'll know, the traditional ways we understand disability tend to be in terms of an individual problem, a medical condition, a psychological flaw. And these traditional approaches sometimes which draw in ideas such as spiritual failing or some kind of individual deficit, lack, construct disabled people as the problem. And disability studies is a reaction to this idea that disability is a problem of the individual. Disability studies does two things. It works with the idea of disability as problem, and it works with the idea of disability as possibility. From a disability studies perspective, the problem is a social, a cultural, a political, and an economic problem. That is to say that people with impairments, physical, sensory, learning disabilities, mental health, become a problem because of the ways in which society reacts to their human difference. And so we can think about the ways in which disabled people are constructed as a problem for the economy. They're constructed as a problem for education. And disabled people are often understood within our cultures in terms of deficit and lack. Now, disability studies then suggest that the problem of disability is not disabled people's problem. That is to say that the problem of disability is actually something constructed in the wider world. And as we know, the wider world is dominated by the beliefs and aspirations of non-disabled people. So one of the biggest problems for disabled people are non-disabled people. Non-disabled people like me, who through their take for granted ideas, through their ways of organizing society, through their conceptions of good economy, of proper education, construct those ideas for non-disabled people. Now, this, of course, is an exclusionary way of constructing the world. And it's a dominant exclusionary way that disability studies seeks to challenge. So the social model of disability, which was mentioned by the professor earlier, which came out very much in the thinking of British disabled people in the 1970s, separates impairment from society and focuses the attention on society. It looks for social barriers. It looks to challenge disabling ways of living. It's very much political, and it's very much focused upon anti-discriminatory legislation and policy. In the States and Canada, 1970s, 1980s onwards, we saw the emergence of something called the cultural approach. And whereas the social model looked at society and economics, the cultural model tried to understand the ways in which disability is created within the kind of quite nebulous practices of our cultures, our histories, our communities, our family histories, and so on. And we find actually that disability is often ever present. Disability is often referred to, used within cultural stories, in scripture, in religious text, in Hollywood movies. The disability plays a role. It plays a role sometimes called a narrative prosthesis role. That is to say that disability appears to permit us to talk about human failing. And so the social and the cultural models have been absolutely crucial to understanding disability as a social and cultural problem. And I imagine for many of you here today, you will be very familiar with social and cultural models of disability. These are the bedrocks, the foundations of the study of disability. But, as I said earlier, disability studies is not just interested in disability as a problem. Disability studies, and particularly what I would call critical disability studies, starts with the assumption that disability provides opportunities. And this, if you like, flipping of disability from problem to opportunity is, I think, where Western, Eastern, global North and global Southern scholars and policymakers and practitioners and advocates can come together to work together to understand what we mean by disability as opportunity. So I just want to spend the last bit of my brief talk here talking you through what I mean about this disability as possibility, opportunity, but also thinking about how we can work together across our continents to really grapple with and take hold of this idea of disability as opportunity. Now, it could be argued that COVID-19 has brought us all together, that actually has brought us all together. Here we are on Zoom, online communities are readily being exploited and used. And there is a language of COVID-19 that we now have that we did not have at the start of 2020. The face mask is ubiquitous. The idea of social distancing is common throughout our nations. The word pandemic is now part of our everyday language. And there is sometimes a temptation to argue that we are all faced with the same kind of conditions because of COVID-19. Now, that is a mistake. Clearly, in the UK, disabled people and poor people are more at risk of suffering long-term health conditions because of COVID-19. Many disabled people in the UK are currently shielding, are outside of communities, are not accessing online spaces because of poverty and other reasons. And so we need to always keep in mind that any consideration of disability as possibility is always aware of the wider social and political background which places disabled people, the 1 billion disabled people across the globe, in positions of weakness, poverty, and exclusion. Now, quite simply, disabled people historically have had to find ways of supporting themselves and their families. Disabled people have a history across the world of innovation, of community building, and what I would call the creation of interdependence. And this is the first thing I want to flag up here around this idea of disability as possibility. The disability demands imaginative and creative methods of interdependence and community building. And of course, the idea of interdependence takes on particular understandings in particular national contexts. So in Indonesia, from my limited understanding of spending numerous months over many years in Indonesia, there is a sense of community, of a collective I, of an individual self that is connected to family and broader community. Now, what COVID-19 has done, I think, has refreshed a discussion and a consideration of what do we understand by community and interdependence. COVID-19 has shown that we are globally connected, but it's also demonstrated the need for individuals not to be isolated. And it seems to me here that disability can lead the way in thinking through how we organize our interdependencies and our communities. Too often, when policymakers, designers, architects school planners, educational providers, and so on. Too often when those kind of people organize their worlds, they do so without thinking about disabled people. Disabled people are always considered at the end of conversations, at the end of design, at the end of curriculum planning, at the end of policy making. This is a huge mistake for two reasons. One is that disabled people often are involved themselves and have the expertise that can be drawn upon to organize the worlds that we live in. And secondly, as COVID-19 has demonstrated, and as disabled people have always historically shown, we need to be more imaginative in our community building now than we ever have. So to return to the question, why disability studies? Why disability studies? Because we need it more than we've ever needed disability studies. Because if we look together at our communities, we will find in disabled people's own ways of engaging imaginative and pragmatic ways of being interdependent. But I want to finish by saying that in order to think about disability studies, we also need to think about disability's hidden reference. And the hidden reference or referent of disability, of course, is ability. Too often, we ignore the assumptions and the problematic assumptions that we hold about ability. COVID-19 has demonstrated that all of us are precarious, that all of us cannot rely upon ourselves for our own sustenance and survival. COVID-19 has exposed the myth that we are all able and self-sufficient enough to look after ourselves. And if one wants to look for new ways of challenging this kind of problematic ideas around ability, then we need to move back to disability. So I welcome the growth of disability studies in Indonesia. And I also welcome the opportunity that we might have to work together across East and West, North and South divides. And I would finish by suggesting that one of the first things we should ask of our own specific context is to what extent disabled people are already organizing and collectivizing and intellectualizing in ways that we need to listen to and draw upon. Be wary of imposing an idea from somewhere else on the specific context, and let us turn to our communities, our local communities, as well as our global communities, to organize, to create independency, and to create ties that bind us. Thank you.
Oh, nggak bisa. Thank you, Professor Dan Goodley. Lots insight from Professor telling us, explaining to us about what kind of disability and what kind of disability studies. So thank you for that. If you all audience want to ask him, so be patient, okay? So we can go to second speaker, Dr. Vivi Yulaswati. Dr. Vivi Yulaswati is Director of Social Protection and Welfare at Bappenas. She holds a PhD in Planning and Development from Southern California. Dr. Vivi Yulaswati, she holds PhD in Planning and Development from Southern California in 2004 and took several training courses in development evaluation, change management, and social protection. So, okay, so please, Dr. Vivi Yulaswati, it's time yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Wike, as a moderator. Hello, everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Good morning to Professor Goodley and good afternoon to everybody. It's been a pleasure to have me in this event. I really enjoy the chat. When Professor Goodley presented, I realized that many people are coming from all places around the world. So happy to have all of you here. I would like to share my presentation. This is only 8 slides. I've been asked to give some update on the policy and then its challenges as well as the importance of disability study. So let me start. Okay, Indonesia have been long experiences in the context of disability policy. We experiences a changing paradigm from what we have experienced earlier on the more charity based, now moving toward to human right based. There have been several laws have been passed, starting or for example in 2011 is about the ratification on the UNCRPD, and then several presidential decree. In 2015, we passed the presidential decree on the Human Rights National Action Plan, which mainly focus on the issue of the disability. Also, we already have a presidential decree on the SDGs, which goes talks more on the inclusiveness. And lastly, we already enacted the law number 8 in 2016 for the person with the disability. So in terms of the political will and the policy, we already have a strong pillar as well as corridor to go with the policy that based on the human right that more fulfill and protect as also respect to the person with this disability. Under the law number 8, 2016, I think many of you already know about this. There are around 15 regulation for implementing this law. However, up until now, we only process 7 of them, because some of them already incorporated in this government regulation. So currently we already have the government regulation for the person with disability master plan. That's PP number 17, 2019, and also PP number 52 for the person with disability social welfare. And lastly, for the PP, the government regulation Number 13 is about the accommodation in education for a person with disability. The four are still in progress, and we do hope that it's coming soon by this year. All of them are already can be enacted, so the implementation of the regulation can really be realized. For the PWD master plan, there are 7 strategic objectives that have been developed. First, about developing an inclusive database and planning. So all of databases, not only the ones that are about the person with disability, but mainly about the big databases like social economy, census, and also others. More and more questions now can be mining in relate to the person with disability. At least there are 9 questions that directly linked to the person with disability in the Susenas. The second is about the free barrier environment provision. It's entitled to many technical ministries. And then the third is about right protection and access to justice. There are many piloting, working with Ministry of Human Rights and Justice, how to accommodate and have a proper justice process. And then empowerment and self-help, the fourth pillar, is along the line with the inclusive economy. More and more document mentioning about inclusive growth and other inclusive policies. 6 is on the education and training, and 7 is about the health access and services. As a principles, the PWD master plan is a reference for more responsive planning and budgeting, and also it's be a reference for many local government how to provide the more friendly basic and public services and provide bigger opportunity of participation for a more inclusive environment. However, the implementation still many gap, because several challenges. First, how to fine-tuning the principles of inclusiveness and also the no one left behind is really takes time and need effort in iterative way. Professor Goodley have been mentioned about the complexity between how to ensure the implementation of the inclusive principles in reality. Other challenges is about the database. It's not only about the person with disability data, but the whole database in Indonesia in many cases were developed in silos. So when we are talking about how to tackle the crisis in more integrated way, then the database come up with different format and also, of course, different data that make the response become complicated. So in the future, there would be continuous updating as well as reformatting how to make an integrated database. The other is about how to align the government priorities and non-government, because in current situation, the government has always have a limitation, not only in terms of funding, but also effort, ideas, as well as human resources. So we still learn how to really build an institution in more collaborative way, including also for the DPOs. other is about how to make the master plan, the person with disability master plan, really into a real situation. Currently, I would say that the master plan, many of us already know about what is it, but don't know how to do. So still not only a gap in situation, but also a gap in the understanding and also in the examples. At the end, we have to aware that Indonesia is not only one dot or point. We are the largest archipelagic country with different situation, not only culture but also languages. So that's part of the challenges that we should aware and think about how to synergize all of the effort to overcome these challenges. When we are talking about the person with disability in Indonesia, it's only about 10.6% of total population because we are the fourth populous country in the world. However, we are talking about 28 million people, so it's huge. It's almost the same size with Malaysia, for example. And there are some people that have disability not only in one perspective, but many different situation, from vision, difficulties in mobility, in concentration, and many others. This is the update from Susenas 2019. Many, actually more than 50% are working, but this data also show that many of them are working in informal sectors, meaning not all of them are in a database of any government policies or program. So in the time of crisis like pandemic COVID-19, it's not easy to make them as a target of the expansion of the social protection program, for example. In schooling, around 30% of the children with disability are in school. I mean, in terms of the database. So still, when there is a crisis and we're talking about the e-learning, learning about who they are and where they are is part of the challenge as well. So the graph on the right hand side is about the difficulty situation during the pandemic COVID-19, in which show us that the difficulties happen in many situations, not only in terms of mobility, but also give an impact on in terms of the economy, as well as on the social aspect. So this is more detailed data. This is coming from the report of the rapid assessment of COVID-19 impact on the PWD done by the DPO network. It shows that many of them actually have been impacted worstly in terms of economy. And we could see, I'm sorry, this is in Bahasa, but big percentage coming from the one who work in informal sectors. So when the government provide a safety net, many of them don't receive the program because in Indonesia, informal sector oftentimes don't apply the health insurance or labor insurance as well as others. So in the time of crisis, it is hard to track where and about the impact of them. In terms of the education, there have been some challenges as well. Online, yes, because the the pandemic have been hit first in the urban areas, but later on when the pandemic is expanded to the rural part, the problem to have an online learning happened also to the person with disability. So on the right circle graph, we could see that around 67% mentioning about the situation, despite that they have a connection, is hard to get a better understanding on the online learning. So in essence, the needs of disability studies, particularly when we're talking about Indonesia, is in a greatly need. Like Professor Goodley mentioned, we up until now, maybe the knowledge about the COVID-19 is not end yet. There have been some situation that we are still trying to estimate, to make a projection, but later on we knew that the estimation is not perfect. So any studies in relate to the knowledge about the relation between the COVID-19, particularly the impact to the PWD, is really in a great need. Talking about the response, likewise, I'm gonna focus more on the availability of the data. The data is not belong only to the government program, but also need to be developed at the local level. Can be done by the CSR, the local government, even by each villages. So in this regard, by having good or better data, we could expand or maybe even reform the programs. Not necessarily the government programs, but any initiative at the locales. The procedure also seems there is a gap. Yeah, when we are talking about the decision-making process at not only at the national but also the local level, COVID-19 really open eyes all of us that the current procedure is not sufficient to take care all of us how to respond in proper way. So in this regard, we should thinking about the institutional setup in terms of collaborations. Like I mentioned earlier, the government should open up the opportunity to work together also with other stakeholders, including the DPO, Disabled Person Organization. Lastly, the needs for the disability studies. I think we need to have a good understanding about the coping mechanism of PWD in different locations. Rural, urban, Java, outside Java, islands, isolated places. And currently, not many PWD studies available. That's why when the government want to expand, again, this is not only about the money, but it's about the what to do, how to do. Even we don't have many luxurious to see some references or studies that we could have a basis to cope in this situation, particularly in regard to the PWD. Because the PWD condition is very varied itself. I would suggest, this is only the example, when we are talking about the studies, the disability studies, maybe we could bring up some studies in the context of collaboration for survival. This is only an example. When the supply chain has been blocked by the distancing, physical distancing or lockdown in any cities, there were some initiative or movement to buy a local products, or even giving some education or dissemination on the hygiene habits or healthy food and so on. I think all the community tacit knowledge in terms of survival need to be written in more systematic way. So when we or government need some reference in the future, we could have more variation in terms of the studies. The other idea or thinking that we could do in terms of disability studies in the context of adaptation in the normal. So there always be changes of needs in these days. This is only example on the APD in Indonesia, or personal protective equipment, which provide opportunity to invent or innovate any product. So I think all of this need to have some facilitation, and for a good practices, it would be very useful if there is someone who review and then write it in more systematic way in terms of study. So in the future, we could use it as a basis. So this is the last slide. I would ask to open eyes of all of us that this is a momentum to reform. Yeah. Not only in terms of policy, but also program, even as a system to be more inclusive and fair. For the next RKP, the annual budget and plan, the government already stated about reform in the health system and also reform for the social protection, as well as reform for food resilience and disaster resilience. When we're talking about the new normal, it doesn't mean that we're going to back to the old normal. So we have to avoid a status quo bias. So it's really open up on the innovation, new way of doing things, learning from response and coping mechanism in communities that I've already give examples. Think also about interlinkages. So it's not only about economy or social, but it's about interlinkages, all sectors, subsectors that need to really work together. Think about the quality of life, meaning it's not only about providing basic services in terms of numbers, but also quality, because in the future, we should be more resilient, because the shock can be happen in any time in the future. Preparedness is another keyword that we should think and use it as a basis to rebuild collaborative institutional setup. At the end, all of these need to be based on the evidence, based on the study, research, and better data. That's all that I could have to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Vivi Yulaswati, for your presentation. Lots insight and knowledge from you, ma'am, about disability policy and disability policy implemented in Indonesia. Also about what kind of work program supporting the person with disability in Indonesia, particularly also when the situation under virus outbreak. So thank you, Ibu. So the next one is Mr. Slamet Thohari. Mr. Slamet Thohari is a senior lecturer in a Department of Sociology, Brawijaya University. And also he is a senior researcher at Center for Disability Studies and Services in Brawijaya, in University of Brawijaya, and also Mr. Slamet Thohari, also Indonesian Chair of Australia Indonesia Disability Research and Advocacy Network. So for Mr. Thohari, are you ready? Okay, so thank you. It's time yours, sir.
Thank you, Ibu Wike, for giving me chance and for delivering me my time to present my presentation. I'm happy here. Finally, we meet each other, Prof. Dan, and also nice to meet you also for the all participants, also Bu Vivi, we meet again. And also thank you for PS Center for Disability Studies and also graduate program for bringing this issue into public, and it is very crucial. Hello everybody, good afternoon. My name is Slamet Thohari. I was a Secretary of Center for Disability Studies and Services from 2012 into 2020. I'm no longer at this institution, and since 2011, I have been involved in IDRAN, Australia Disability Research and Advocacy Network, as Indonesian chair. I'm happy here to be appointed as a speaker, as well as to handle this marvelous webinar. And I want to show my Is it okay? Is it good?
Okay,
Yep.
okay, it's good.
So here is my contact. If you want to have a correspondence with me, it's fine. This is my email. So actually, I'm a bit nervous talking about disability studies in Indonesian context here, because some of our seniors are being participant here. Actually, they are more appropriate than me talking on this astonishing in this issue in this astonishing webinar. And okay, so Indonesia is a big country with 17,000 islands, and actually there are questions here. It is very critical question and stunning question, such as, do we have disability studies in Indonesia, and what school of thought that we produce? And as a global South country, even in my opinion, that we are barely involved in the development of global South of disability studies. As post-colonial country, do we involve in the development of post-colonial disability studies? This is also my question. So, as a big country, I know that Indonesia have a problem with very big population of people with disabilities. More than, correct me if I'm wrong, more than 10% of our population are disabled, which means that it can be more than 25 million of people with disabilities are here in Indonesia. And 9.5 of our population are elderly people. And we have to know also that we have 70 million of young people, which means 70 million of young people, which bonus demography, which means that 20 and 30 years again, those young people will going to be elderly people, and our elderly people will be multiplies. And are we ready for the accessible infrastructure? So that's the question. So Indonesian culture is also a big issue if we want to implement the kind of many concepts and many approaches in disability studies, social model, independent living model, and human right model, and others model, because Indonesia is a living portrait of a traditional methodologist niche with Islamic cosmology. Japanese culture as a dominant one tend to keep a value of togetherness and community. It is not like Western society, which seem very individual. I have been living in America for 2 years, but seem very individual. In Indonesia, problem belonging to person seem regarded as belong to those of group of community. We have term here, mangan orang mangan kumpul, which means it is not important whether we can eat or not, but the most important thing is togetherness. This is a very well-known philosophy that has become legacy taken for granted by our society in our daily life. And it's very influential to our society and also policy. If one member of our society defects from the rule of the community, unlike the Western society, where the individuals are predominantly member of nuclear family, most people in Japanese, and as I know I'm a Japanese, think that of themselves, first and foremost, they have to extend it to families. Parents are also, parent here, not only for the responsible for the person if you do wrong, parents are also responsible for the mistake or you're wrong, and for parents are also responsible for the children's growth and also the problem. So if you got a kid doing something wrong, probably the kid will be asked, "Anak sopo? Whose child are you?" So this is so parent-centric. So this cosmology is influential, so very influential to use, very influential to the use of public spaces, and also the use of public facilities. For example, is using of sidewalk that have been occupied by street vendors, and also some of people also have reason like they never allow their children to go along because the parent centric. Because why? Because if something wrong, the family will be judged by the society. So they never allow people with disabilities to independently. So it's sometimes effect to the the occupying, and also the effect the use of ramp and also guiding block that never used by disabled and have been occupied by street vendors. I have a picture on this. Yeah, in my opinion, this is because of the value of our society, because the communality and parent-centric and accessibility is a Western culture that tend to be more individual, but we have a different culture that we have to reinterpret later on. I will explain it. So more than that, we have also Islam. Islam makes a major contribution in shaping the view and the behavior of person with disabilities, to address person with disabilities as the object of pity rather than human rights perspective. For instance, it has been very prevalent for people to go to panti asuhan or nursing homes and boarding special school during the Ramadan especially, to give or to share the alms, or we call it as sedekah, expressing their pity for the mustad'afin or the weak people. It shows Islamic teaching and disability perceived as a narration that people with disabilities are vulnerable, group that need help, and also many establishment of nursing home for people with disabilities in Indonesia, which actually institutionalization of people with disabilities, strongly and largely motivated by Islamic teaching, which helping people in charity way. So we have a challenge, cultural challenge, religious challenge, and also lucky us that some of our progressive Muslim group, they have a great interpretation that how they do interpretation of Islamic teaching to be more progressive and also to be more friendly and to be more pro to human rights. They publish a book Fikih Disabilitas with Islamic regulation in people with disabilities with progressive interpretation. I know that some NU and also Muhammadiyah, they have a program on people with disabilities. Yesterday, just inform you that my my friend and I in Yakum and also in Basul Masail Nahdlatul Ulama just have focus group discussion on mental person with madness, and also we call it in Indonesia psychosocial and also person with psychosocial and fikih with person fikih social. This is also an a struggle to interpret the religion to be more friendly and to be more not biased to people with disabilities. And so we have also the institutionalization of disability, and this is the modern approach of disability in Indonesia. Actually was introduced by colonial. The first special school here is in Indonesia is the first special school is Visual Environment Special School in Bandung, West Java, established in 1901 and 1927. Another special school established there. The catering educational need for children with learning disabilities. Actually, they use language, not the language retarded person, but I changed with learning difficulties. But my document said that retarded person. Okay, that's a very old language. So I'm going to show you about the history of the way government call people with disabilities in regulation. The way they call actually is representing the paradigm of the way people or government see approach to people with disabilities. In 47 we have here we have bercacat atau with defect, and in 1954 we have person with physical or mental deficit atau orang-orang dalam keadaan kekurangan jasmani atau rohani, or I translate in English person who has physical or mental deficit. And then in 1974 we have tuna, tunarungu, tuna daksa, tuna, which means tuna in Java is we don't have it, or lost or without, tunawisma without home. So he is tuna daksa mean without body. I don't know. It's quite funny, I think. And then in 1980 we have another term which is person with suffering from defect. Oh, yeah, penderita cacat. In English we can translate to person with suffering from defect. So disability is suffer. Okay. So now after that we have a after that we have a penyandang cacat in the regulation on 1997. Penyandang cacat means person with deformed or disabled person, not people with disabilities. And after that in 2011, after ratifying the CRPD, Indonesia has new term which is penyandang disabilitas, or in English we call it as person with disabilities. So here is the road to get the implementation of equal right. Whatever the approach, like social model, human right model, independent living, ableism model, CRIP model, or they have to, you have to adapt the Indonesian culture because there are challenges. The first is those approach perspective are still available. I mean, the Western, the Japanese culture, the Indonesian culture, the colonial culture, which is institutionalizing people with disabilities, introduced by Western society via colonial, they're still available in Indonesia. They're contesting in each other. But some of NGO and also DPOs brought new perspective social model. If we want to implement the equal right person with disabilities or implement the social model, which is very common now in Indonesia, and human right approach, which also very common in disability activists, we have to first taking deep consideration into Indonesian culture. Or in another term, we have to use them as a social capital, interpreting the culture so that we have to make make them as an instrument to smooth our culture. Here, the culture sometimes can be burdened.
Ini kalau luar negeri sih.
Starter can
Sing
be
Singapura, sing Australia.
implementation.
Ya sing Singapura kayak Keriheng.
Sorry, please the admin. Admin, please.
Yes, we will fix it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have also a problem to interpret the Islam because Islam is so influential in Indonesia. This Indonesia need make a friendly interpretation. Islamic.
Saya ngerti.
Kira bayar ya?
80.000
Ning endi?
nang
Okay. Aduh, Pak Slamet. Pak Slamet, could you please make on
Okay.
your... Okay, thank you.
I think. Okay. Any concept from Western, any concept from any concept of Western theory will get difficulties and also challengings, and they will get distract to be implemented in Indonesia because just like independent living, its concept of people with disability should be independent and their rights should be protected by government and society. But sometimes, this concept is low and make it in the liberty and also independent is the essential and basic thing from the concept. This is not congruent with Indonesian culture. So the parent-centrist, harmony, and so it's mean we have to take care of them. So this is the challenge that we have to deal with this. So I just do not research related to the scholar. So I Google it. I Google disability in Indonesia. Yeah, comparing to other countries. There are 1,000, only 1,000 result. So I also Google disabilitas, Indonesian language for disability, is only 15,000 result. So I also Google difabel. Which only 6,000 result. Comparing to, let's say I compare to disability in Australia, they are million result. Or disability in UK, they are million result. Or even in our neighbor Malaysia, orang kurang upaya. I think this is the way the Malaysian call for the people with disabilities. They are 800,000 results. So Indonesia is so limited. We need more people to talk about disabilities. We need more people to talk about disabilities in many perspectives, in many ways. This is a very, challenge. This is very challenging for us to do more and more, even TPO, academic, stakeholders to talk about disability more and more. So this data is showing about the so very limited in talking about people with disabilities. Even disability research service in campus is also the data. There are only 10 campus giving services for students with disabilities, and Indonesia has 4,500,000 of higher education. Only 10 university giving services for students with disabilities. I think I'm happy. What about the disability studies? I'm happy with my university, Universitas Brawijaya. They raise the issue of disability. They open the master program of disability studies. I'm so optimistic person that we will contribute to the development of disability studies, and we also contribute to the policy in Indonesia. This is a very good quote that I got from Lisa Watson. If you come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you come because your liberation is bound up with mine, let's us work together. I think that's what I'm going to say, what I'm going to talk, that's what I talk. Time is yours, Ibu Wike. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Slamet Thohari, for your insight. He's talking about many disability in Indonesian culture, and also how Indonesian community in Indonesian community context, and also relationship between disabled and religion. So lots issue coming from discussion. So I will go to next session, Q&A, question and answer. Everyone can ask a question directly by click the raise hand on the screen on participant. But because we have a limitation time, just only a few audience can ask directly. I'm sorry about that. But before that, I can also read some questions from audience, and I hope all speakers can respond the question. Like from Ibu Monica Madianingrum. Ibu Monica asks to Professor Dan Goodley. Considering what he mentioned about non-disabled people are often the main problem of disability, how non-disabled people should engage in disability studies, what roles and projects which are crucial to be undertook. I think maybe Professor Dan Goodley can respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for the presentations from Vivi and Slamet. I mean, we have to acknowledge that non-disabled people occupy a privileged and powerful position, and non-disabled people therefore have to address themselves as a problem, and they need to relinquish power. In the UK, when a question of disability is often asked, then the answer is sought from doctors, medical doctors, from academics, from policymakers, but is very rarely asked of disabled people, who are the experts by experience. So for me, I think the first thing we need to do is to recognize that non-disabled people occupy a kind of ableist supremacy, a little bit like white supremacy. And we need to take non-disabled people to task, to challenge them, to challenge their ideas, their assumptions. But I think it's fair to say that being non-disabled will be different where you are in the world. And I think, as we've just heard from the last presentation, one needs to recognize that people are not just non-disabled, they occupy particular places, cultural positions, professional positions, positions of status. And so we have intersections here that need to be addressed. For in the UK, for me, there needs to be a real challenge to so-called expertise of non-disabled people, excuse me, which causes disabled people real problems.
Hello. Hello, Professor Goodley.
Yeah, you have to unmute first.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I can hear. Thank you. Oh,
Enggak.
Office apa?
Office gendong.
Wis duana.
Wis mutu.
Ucu lagi
Profesor-
tahun pira sih?
Profesor.
Ini
Sana anaknya ninggal.
nang kandungan, berarti wayah lahiran.
Itu direpot aja jangan lu.
Oh, berarti orang kedetek. Berarti jangan lahirannya sesar.
Aturannya ya.
Iya, kayak gue
Sorry about. Okay, so could you please share again, Professor Goodley?
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy. I feel I've answered that question. Happy to go back.
Okay, so is there any response from Ibu Monica? Are you happy? Okay, so we can go to the next question from Pak Iska or Pak Gunawan. Is there any concept of disability inclusive model in building and infrastructure design that is suitable for rapid development in developing countries such as Indonesia? I think this is not only to Professor Kuti, but also to Ibu Vivi Yulaswati.
Yeah, I mean, we in the UK, we obviously have models of universal design and inclusive design. And inclusive design and universal design are different. But the idea of kind of inclusive design is very much in keeping with the idea that we start with speaking to disabled people and their organizations at the very start of considering any design. Currently in the UK, the problem that we have is that universal design is a recommendation rather than an essential policy requirement. So the designers of buildings or architects and companies designing buildings can demonstrate that they are being inclusive, but they are not currently expected by law to be inclusive. And so it's essential that we need to get as much of that, those recommendations placed in legislation and in law. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor, there is one question from Dominic Dean from Germany. I think he asks about how do you see the role of the so-called global north, speaking for the global south. How do you see the academic and NGO or DPO future concerning a global disability studies discourse? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the last presentation by Slamet, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was brilliant, because what you've done there is to remind us that ideas around disability studies created in the global north should never be transplanted into the global south. For two reasons. One is the problem of colonization, a new kind of colonization. We have to be very wary of that. And secondly, as you've demonstrated here with your reference to Islam and reference to community and interdependence that already exists within Indonesia, we need to be mindful of understanding how those kind of knowledge systems and ways of being together are actually essentially important in trying to think through how we organize disability theory, policy and practice. Would you agree?
Agree, yeah.
Okay, maybe Pak Slamet Thohari can respond also.
Actually, I have a person, there is a book written by, I don't know, I think Sound Guk. Dan is also one of the contributor on that book, and also Karen Soldatic. Yeah, it's about disability and global south. The book is so clear about talking about the role of between global north and global south. Yeah, I totally agree that we cannot just transplant and also forcing the concept and approach, which is actually coming from different context and also what I call it like zeitgeist, different zeitgeist. So but the theories of disability should also consider DPOs and also disabled scholar from global south as well to rebuild and also reconsider the idea on disability studies.
Yeah. I think there is a not question but about a statement from Pradya Pertiwi. I think this is we're going to Pak Amex, Pak Slamet Thohari. A very intriguing question about conceptualization of people with disability in Indonesia. I believe your book is one that explores in depth how disability is perceived in Japanese society. So we are lacking perspective of other Indonesian culture. So is it good?
It's not question, yeah.
Not question, but just her statement. But I think she wants to get a response from you, I think.
Yeah, but we have to, I totally agree with the Dan statement about the, intellectualizing people with disabilities. As you know that many people, sorry to say that, people with disability has been, objected as a person to get interview, object of data, but the important thing for me is intellectualizing or enlightening and empowering people with disabilities. We cannot voice people with disabilities. What we can do for the non-disabled is giving the space for people with disabilities to express their voice themselves. So I read the Indian feminist Spivak. She said like this critical theories is not to give the voice of subaltern, but to give the space for the subaltern to speak out themselves. So, something like that. So actually, the disability studies is not giving voice for people with disabilities, but actually is clearing the space which is biased, which is dominated, which is occupied by ableism culture and able-minded culture, so something like that. So disability studies and also non-disabled can join us because this kind of ableism is part of this struggle as well. What we can do is clearing the spaces, clearing the bias, and make the society more inclusive and giving the space for people with disabilities to be involved in society and voicing themselves, not voicing the disabled people. That's my opinion, a very rough opinion. We need to talk philosophically again, but
Yeah, thank you. I think Professor Goodley also give a response to some thoughts of Ibu Vivi and Pak Slamet Thohari. I think first, non-disabled people need to relinquish their power. Non-disabled people need to consider their role as inherently problematic. They have maintained the non-disabled, albeit dominant imaginary. There is a need to address albeit supremacy. And then I think the second one, the third one, be wary of importing any knowledge from the global north. Instead, how high we utilize global southern knowledge in contributing to critical global disability studies. I think that's statement from Professor Goodley to Ibu Vivi and Pak Slamet. Ibu Vivi want to respond back or?
Yeah, I just want to add some points actually. Some question and relate to the design, the inclusive design, as well as the inclusiveness policy in jobs, for example. What I could say that in terms of policy, we actually already have some foundation, yeah. But again, because we are in a big country with so many people, in many cases the problem are in the implementation. So the problems include some of the element of the performance indicators. For example, there are many sectors that not yet equipped by the performance indicators. Also, sometimes we have low supervision, monitoring, and control, and at the end, weak law enforcement. So I think all of these need all of us to develop kind of like a social control, yeah, awareness, building awareness about the rights. Despite that the government already provide or build or give some foundation, again, if all of us not don't have an awareness or I would say like a social control, I think it's almost nothing. No, nothing in the realization. So again, some studies that could open up many people about the situations and awareness about the importance that we should not leave anyone left behind. It's really important.
Okay. There are one question again, Ibu, from Utami Dewi. How about the government planning to provide inclusive employment for persons with disabilities in Indonesia, since we already implemented the employment quota policy, 1% in private sector and 2% in public sector?
Yeah, likewise, Mbak Wike, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of regulation, policy, there have been so many policy been enacted, yeah. But again, in the implementation, I think we have a good examples, firms who receive disabled even more than 1% or even more than 10%. Yeah, but then it's not only about receiving them in the beginning, but also how to make them what is it? Betah tuh apa ya? Comfy, yeah, with the environment, having a good relationship between others, because some cases show that the disabled that have been received by a firm not only less than 6 months, then he or she will left the opportunity by many reason. Yeah. So I think again, I think when we're talking about the inclusiveness, we should come up with the same understanding about what is it and also how to really implement it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ibu. One question again to Professor Goodley from Iko Nugroho. What are your strategies for inclusiveness in disability in university?
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's a brilliant question. So, I mean, one of the models that we use, and I think it addresses one of the questions that was in the chat box as well, from, I'm just reading now, Ishaq Salim, founder of Indonesia Disability Movement.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with the comments there. So one of the models which we adopt and try to adopt within the universities is something called co-production, which comes from community-based research, which comes from community organizations, and that's about bringing together academics and non-academics to work towards knowledge production that addresses questions and concerns of the community. And what that means is not giving up on academia or giving up on the university, but seeing what the university can offer the community and what the community can offer the university. And to recognize that, as you said here, that knowledge is not just produced in universities, it's produced in communities, in disabled people's organizations. And we need to work together to generate knowledge together. And through doing that, we can promote inclusion. So if you want to think about promoting inclusion in a university, speak to disabled people's communities within the university and outside of the university. Work together collaboratively. Recognize that we will have arguments and we will disagree and we will hate each other now and again, and also love each other. Because this is where real knowledge takes place. And it goes back to what Vivi was saying earlier around the ways in which we implement inclusion is by bringing in disabled people's organizations right from the start. So, you know, this is not the worst knowledge is created only in universities, because it's knowledge created within universities by academics for other academics. That's why most people do not want to be locked in an elevator with an academic, because it would be the most boring thing ever, right? We need to generate knowledge outside the university and bringing the university and the community together. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Goodley. There are two questions. For Ibu Vivi, how about development planning in Indonesia will be reach the inclusive development through SDGs? If from Anggreni Pikulima.
I was about to write. Okay. Basically, the process is about building a commitment. So it's not only from, I think when we are talking about or maybe I should say, the differences between the MDGs and the SDGs is about the way to do it. Yeah. On the SDGs, since the beginning, there have been a commitment about working together, not only from the government side, but also other stakeholders. Many of us already know about the goals, yeah, but then how to achieve the goals and realize that actually the achievement of those goals rely upon also the achievement of other goals. So I'm talking about the interlinkages. So in this regard, when we are talking about working together, doesn't mean that someone will bring their own flag, but need to understand about other flags and really building a commitment. So it's about the timeline. It's about clear indicators on the performance and output, and I think apa namanya, COVID-19 is really open the fact that what we've been so busy in the previous years with all the coordination is not enough, yeah, because I think many of us still working in silos. Seems that we already completed, but that's within our own goal or our own portfolio. In fact, all the works need to collaborate, but again, then how I think is really try and error and take some time to reflect from knowledge, from writings, and also from sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu. So one last question from Eko Nugroho to Mr. Thohari. Why only 10 universities that practice the disability inclusiveness in Indonesian universities?
That's also the big question for, Bu Vivi can also answer that, because government actually for the current decade that we have won Win Sunan Kalijaga, University of Islamic State in Kalijaga, then UP in 2011, we initiate the inclusive and also have a quota for people with disabilities to get involved in our education in our university. And then after that, we promote the idea of inclusiveness of and the need of inclusiveness of people with disabilities in university, and some great result that our government also have a regulation related to the university should open for all people, including people with disabilities, and also they should open disability services, or we call it ULD, unit layanan disabilitas, disability services. But yeah, only big universities can afford, only the university can provide disability services, because this regulation is just 2 or 3 years ago. Probably we need more to advocacy. We need more advocacy to university, so they tend to be more inclusive. I think I'm happy because my university is leading university in giving services for students with disabilities, and lucky us, congratulations for Pak Rector and also for Ibu Zubaidah Ningsih. Last year we got award from Zero Project from UN. Some of the official people are coming to Australia because they are so inclusive, and one of the important university in Indonesia giving important and influential in giving services for students with disabilities. Yeah, I'm happy for that.
Yeah.
And also Pak Eko actually is part of the team that making our university more inclusive.
Okay. So I think no question from audience. So I think this is the end. So before I close this session, thank you so much for all speakers, Professor Dan Goodley, Ibu Vivi Yulaswati, and Pak Slamet Thohari. I hope your insight and your knowledge sharing with us will benefit to us. And I hope, because we have already initiated the new program, disability studies, so I hope we can join with us to be our students. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm not conclude all insight, but you have already get some enlightenment from all speakers. So, but I will take this opportunity to thank for all speakers and audiences for joining the international webinar this afternoon. So hope all insight and knowledge sharing by our speaker audience will enlighten us, particularly about disability studies. So thank you so much. So I'm handing back to co-host Ibu Vanessa. Thank you.
Okay, as the conclusion has been delivered by Dr. Wike, M.Si, it also means that our webinar has come to an end. Therefore, I would like to say thank you to the sign language interpreter and the typist for assisting our webinar, so everyone have a better understanding about the discussion. Also, I want to say thank you to all staff for organizing this webinar and ensure that the event ran smoothly. And I am grateful for all your presence and participation, in which apprise the awareness and the importance of the inclusive environment in higher education level. Ladies and gentlemen, you are the very important part of the webinar success. I wish you all a blessed day. Stay safe and healthy during these hard times. Let's hope that this pandemic will end soon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, let's take a picture. Please turn on your video camera on. And I would like to remind all the audience that please don't forget to fill up the form, because it's really important for you to get the seminar certificate. If you didn't fill up the form, then you will not get the seminar certificate. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Marjono, for giving this opportunity. I really appreciate. Pak Marjono is a
welcome. Yeah.
Head of graduate program. We are really happy here. We have opportunity right now to study on disability studies because of his generosity, I think.
Thank you. You are welcome. And you are so allergic for everybody. Yeah. Thank you.
No, video.
Okay, so we can start to take picture.
One.
Say cheese.
Okay, thank you for all speakers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you again.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Hey, Victor Zuang. Kerry.
Ikan bagai mangkel telan videoku gak di anu video.
Bu Vivi, terima kasih Bu Vivi.
Sami-sami, saya pamit ya. Selamat.
Iya, Ibu Vivi, terima kasih ya. Terima
Have a
kasih.
nice weekend, everybody.
Bye everybody.
Yeah.
Hi Amy.
Hello. Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Salam Pak Thohari.
Salam inklusi.
Salam.
Salam.
Bye,
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Semoga lebih baik lagi dan Undang-Undang Nomor 8 Tahun 2016 berjalan dengan baik sebaik-baiknya.
Amin.
Amin. Amin.
Semoga ada event yang seperti ini lagi ke depan.
Amin, iya. Baru lulus, Kak.
Ya. Saya dari Kalimantan Selatan.
Oh, saya dari Tegal, dari Universitas Pancasakti. Nah, ini alhamdulillah kemarin baru lulus.
Siapa ya, Bang? Bu Wike itu Ninyo ang ngone pemerintah